And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Sharif Abdul Quddus. The coup regime in Honduras appears to be backing off its attempt to shut down protests and limit free speech amidst growing protests for the restoration of the ousted President Manuel Zelaya. On Sunday, the coup government of Roberto Micheletti announced a 45-day decree that imposed sweeping restrictions on civil liberties, including banning unauthorized public meetings, allowing the government to shut down broadcasters, and giving police the authority to make arrests without warrants. After congressional leaders warned they would not approve the decree, Micheletti gave a televised news conference Monday evening asking for, quote, forgiveness from the Honduran people, and said he would lift the decree as, quote, quickly as possible. Earlier that day, masked police officers and soldiers shut down 2 media outlets that have criticized the coup regime. Government forces also cordoned off a street to prevent a march of several hundred supporters of ousted President Zelaya. Zelaya has remained inside the Brazilian embassy since finally returning to Honduras 1 week ago. The Micheletti government has now given Brazil a 10-day deadline to hand over Zelaya or face the embassy's closure. The coup regime issued the threat as its soldiers continued to surround the embassy and limit the delivery of supplies. Brazil has rejected the ultimatum and says Zelaya will stay as long as he needs. Brazil's representative to the Organization of American States, Rui de Lima Caçaias e Silva, warned of the severity of the crisis.
A situação na embaixada é uma situação grave.
The situation in the embassy is a grave situation, with the potential for drama.
O governo brasileiro, por intermédio do ministro das Relações Exteriores, solicitou.
For that reason, the Brazilian government, by way of their foreign minister, solicited the UN Security Council to conduct a meeting to specifically deal with the insecurity of Brazil's embassy in Tegucigalpa.
Da Embaixada do Brasil em Tegucigalpa,
especially as regards disrespecting the norms established in international charters regarding diplomatic missions.
consagradas no direito internacional.
The coup regime on Monday refused entry to a delegation from the Organization of American States that had come to seek a negotiated solution to the crisis. Speaking in Washington, the U.S. ambassador to the OAS, Louis Amsalem, criticized the coup regime's decision, but then turned around to issue a harsh condemnation of ousted President Zelaya.
We therefore call on all within Honduras and outside Honduras to avoid actions and pronouncements which foment unrest and violence. The return of President Zelaya to Honduras, absent an agreement, is irresponsible and foolish, and serves neither the interests of the Honduran people nor of those seeking the peaceful reestablishment of the democratic order in Honduras.
On Monday night, Zelaya addressed the United Nations General Assembly via a mobile phone that his foreign minister held up to the podium.
My greetings to the United Nations. My greetings to the United Nations. Anybody who had any doubt that a dictatorship is taking hold of my country, now with what has happened in the last 93 days of repression, I think that any of those doubts that might have subsisted are dispelled. That besides being subjected to a coup d'etat, Honduras is being subjected to a fascist rule, which is suppressing the rights of its citizens and which is oppressing the Honduran people.
We go now to the Brazilian embassy in Tegucigalpa, where we were joined via Democracy Now! Video stream by Andrés Conteris. He's the Program on the Americas Director for Nonviolence International and also works at Democracy Now! On Espanol. He's been inside the Brazilian embassy for the past week. We're also joined from Washington, D.C. by Dr. Luther Castillo. He's an indigenous physician from the Atlantic coast of Honduras. He founded the first hospital and health center in that region. He's also Secretary of Communications for the National Resistance Front against the coup in Honduras. Shortly before the coup, he had been named Director of International Cooperation in the Honduran Foreign Ministry. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! First, we're going to go to Andrés Conteris. He's joining us on the telephone, actually, from inside the Brazilian embassy in Tegucigalpa. Andrés, welcome to Democracy Now!
It's a pleasure, Sharif.
Can you start off by telling us what exactly is happening right now inside the embassy? What do you see outside? Are soldiers outside the embassy?
Yes, there are many soldiers right outside the embassy. There are hundreds, but visible right outside here are probably a dozen. This place has been militarized since just over a week ago, right after the return of President Zelaya to Honduras. The repression was immediately felt in the very, very violent eviction that happened exactly 1 week ago this morning. Over 500 revelers who were dancing in the street were brutally repressed by the soldiers. Tear gas was used, and that tear gas completely filled the embassy here.
And Andrés, you've been there for a week now. We've heard reports of a sound weapon being used, similar to the one that we reported on used in Pittsburgh at the G20. Can you confirm or deny that?
That weapon having to do with audio definitely was used, a very sharp, piercing noise that really, really causes deep, deep distress. Other weapons have been used. I have not been able to confirm gases used after the tear gas incident, but other people did feel attacked by gas during this past week.
And the coup regime has given the Brazilian embassy 10 days to hand over Manuel Zelaya or grant him asylum in Brazil. Brazil has denied this, has refused to do so. What is President Zelaya saying right now about what's happening?
What President Zelaya is saying is that the international community needs to follow up with the declarations that were approved by both the United Nations, the OAS, as well as the San Jose Accords. He is very open to dialogue in that framework of those documents. Every single one of them says that he needs to be reinstated as the president, the democratically elected leader of Honduras. And this coup regime here is not willing to do that. Other things that he says clearly are having to do with the incredible amount of repression that is being felt around Honduras. Just yesterday, they buried a young woman named Wendy who died as a result of the tear gas a week ago here in the embassy area. She had asthma and suffered from that, was hospitalized, and then later died. She's just one of many, many who have passed away as a result of the brutality of the Micheletti regime. And what is really disconcerting is that the United States, through the Obama administration, has not said one word condemning the human rights atrocities here, in spite of the fact that they have been very, very well documented by the most recognized human rights organizations in the world. Congressman Grijalva of Arizona wrote a very clear letter to Obama documenting all of this, and there has been no response by this administration in terms of publicly condemning the human rights violations by this regime.
And speaking of the U.S. response, last night we heard possibly the harshest condemnation from a top diplomat, a U.S. top diplomat, Luis Anselm, the representative to the OAS. He called Zelaya's return irresponsible and foolish. Your response?
This comment by Ambassador Anselm comes a week after Hillary Clinton clearly welcomed President Zelaya back to Honduras. So we're seeing a double face in terms of the policy from the Obama administration in terms of is he welcome or is it foolish for him to have returned. One thing to know about the background of Ambassador Anselm is that he was with the Southcom, the Pentagon's organization in Latin America. And the military policy with regard to Honduras has to be mentioned because it's very key. The U.S. continues to train Honduran soldiers at the School of the Americas in spite of the fact that they have said that ties have been severed. The Honduras remained invited to the military maneuvers called Panamax 2009, which were 21 countries invited from September 11th to September 22nd. And Honduras was on the list. The Pentagon never withdrew them, and the only reason they didn't participate is because of other countries in South America refused to go to the maneuvers if Honduras was going to remain as participating.
And this issue of the crackdown on civil liberties, Micheletti issued a decree on Sunday, a 45-day decree with sweeping restrictions on civil liberties. He's pledged to reverse that following congressional leaders not giving him support. But this did, the day after he issued the decree, he closed down 2 media stations, one of them being Radio Globo, that I believe President Zelaya has frequently done interviews on. What has been the effect of this inside the embassy?
Inside the embassy, what we have been feeling is terrorism on part of this regime as they issued this decree, which really defines them outright as an absolute dictatorship. Constitutional guarantees in the Honduran Constitution